Well, thank you for coming. I think you could put some light because I won't be using any slides.
Oh, okay.
Okay? So,
Would you mind to turn on the microphone?
to tell you the truth, I'm glad we don't have too big an audience today because it's the first time we give this lecture, and it's not exactly politically correct, but it expresses very truly my own opinions. If you like it, well, we will discuss with our new friends how to repeat it. Now, what I'm going to talk about is the very special and unique situation of Turkey, a situation which is generally unknown, not clearly known, or even ignored, vis-à-vis the Western world, notably Europe and the United States, vis-à-vis the Arab world, and more especially the Middle East, and also vis-à-vis Central Asia. And why, therefore, today Turkey constitutes a unique opportunity which is generally neglected or poorly treated. And in order to strike your imagination a bit, I'm going to ask you to think about an example. We belong here to the so-called Anglo-Saxon world, which is a conglomerate of various countries throughout the world who speak English, who have a religious background which is generally Christian, more often Protestant, who are more often white people, and what ties them together is the language, the culture, and also the institutions. Try to imagine that very faraway people, somewhere in Asia, or in the Pacific, or in Africa, referring to that world, would call it by the name of a language. But they wouldn't say the Anglo-Saxon world, they would say the English world, because they speak English. And to the people of that world, they would refer to as the English. And that means that it would encompass people who were, of course, part of the British Isles, but also who were, for a long time, conquests of the British Empire, such as the Irish, who spoke English by force and then by convenience, but still stick to their Gaelic mother language. The Irish wouldn't like that. Also, you would consider Christian people who were for centuries faithfully allied to Britain, but happened to speak other languages, like the Portuguese. And you would refer to them as English people. The Portuguese wouldn't like that. And you could extend it to countries who were at some time part of the Portuguese Empire, like Brazil, who still speaks Portuguese, and by extension would be referred to as English people. I assure you the Brazilians wouldn't like that. It seems ludicrous, and yet we Americans tend to call Arabs all the people from the Muslim world, just as the same as we tend to call Latinos people as different as the Chileans, the Brazilians, or the Mexicans. Oh, they are in good terms with each other, but they don't like the notion that they are supposedly put in the same pot. Now, let's go back to the Anglo-Saxons. Where do they come from, really? In the 5th century, the British Isles were gradually invaded by Viking people coming from Scandinavia, called the Angles. They were coming from Denmark, and the Saxons, who were coming from the Baltic Sea. And because of those Scandinavian roots, the British still recognize and honor their ancient Viking roots and maintain a special relationship with these countries, even though these countries do not speak English, except, of course, when they learned it at school, which is frequent. Well, this comparison is useful to understand Turkey's unique situation between the Arab world, the West, and Central Asia. And here I'm not going to talk about current events or immediate issues between Turkey and specific countries today. I will talk about why the European Union must let Turkey in the Union as soon as practicable, and why the US should treat Turkey not only as a key ally, because Turkey has been that since NATO exists, but also as a major partner in helping the whole world get out of the mess in the Middle East today, which is turning into a horrendous mess, a dangerous mess, which may have impact on peace in the whole world. Now, none of these notions which I expressed are politically correct today. In Europe today, there are conflicting opinions about Turkey. In the US, there is a lot of ignorance. And as for the Turks, let me be blunt, they're a bit fed up with the West right now. Nevertheless, I still consider that the priority is here, and missing this opportunity would be potentially very dangerous. Now, why do I personally talk about Turkey? I have lived in Turkey for 6 months in 1966. I've had various very positive experiences with Turkish people, privately and in business. The last time I was there was 2 years ago. I have worked in Turkey relating to several industries, and I have always enjoyed, notably, the hospitality and the tolerance. Now, nevertheless, trying to strike your imagination again, I'm going to take a past example. Istanbul was in a very remote past called Byzantium, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, and later Constantinople, to honor a Roman emperor who played a major role in spreading the Christian religion. And in 1453, Constantinople was besieged by the Turks, who would eventually take control of the city. During that siege, the Constantinople decision-makers are famous in history for discussing the sex of angels, while the Turks were mounting to the breach. Eventually, of course, the Turks ended up conquering Constantinople. Today, when Turkey represents an opportunity and not at all a threat, I'm afraid that the Europeans are again discussing the sex of angels when discussing the Turkish issue. In 1453, the Turks were invaders. Today, they are an urgent opportunity and a major one. And the opportunity has to do with the Arab world. So what is the Arab world? It consists in 24 nations, in 325 million people, that's a lot of people, who speak Arabic as a main language, and who are mostly Muslims. Mostly, but not all, remember that. These countries go from West Africa to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, around the Mediterranean and the Middle East. And facing them, you have 500 million Europeans, who are now more or less loosely united is a confederation with legal, judicial, financial, and monetary ties. And in this Europe, you have about 15 to 20 million people of Muslim origin. When I say they are of Muslim origin, the immense majority of them originated in the Arab world. But some of them are second, third, fourth generation, or even more. In France, where you have roughly about 5 million people of Muslim roots, you have quite a lot of them who don't exactly remember when the first of them was born in the country, in France. And you have a majority of people which, if the French wanted to throw them out, well, they wouldn't know where to go. Among those 5 million people, if you take France as an example, a few of them are outcasts. They are school dropouts. They are teenagers creating trouble. They are dropouts even from Islam itself. I remember a French manager telling me about those kids raising trouble. I wish they were Muslims. They would have learned a good education, respect of private property, courtesy. They would have values which are 99% common with Christian values. They are the kids who are burning cars in France and giving a reputation to the Muslims steering trouble in France and in other countries. But a majority of them are integrated or integrating, and yet they want to keep their roots alive while learning the culture and the institutions of their new country. They are the ones you never hear about. They don't make the news. They don't interest the journalists. And yet they have opinions, they have problems, they have hopes, they have ambitions, and even if they feel loyal to their new country, they do not always disagree with the policy of that new country, and they do not always agree with the US policy. A small but active minority of them are Christians from Lebanon, Egypt, and others. Some Muslims converted to the Christian faith, and yet you'll be surprised to know that some native Europeans of Christian roots have converted to Islam. 60,000 French people are in that case. For Europe, successfully integrating all these people is, on the one side, a major positive challenge. Integrating them means growth, means prosperity, means multiculture. But there is another aspect. There is no choice. Either we succeed in integration in Europe, or we are going to face a major crisis, and the Arab world will face a major crisis. So there is no chance. Now let's talk about the Turks in all this. Well, Turkey is not part of the Arab world. The Turks are not Arabs, not even Semites. They came from Central Asia. And they became Muslims, I would say, excuse my humor, a bit for the same reason that the French became Christians. You see, the Franks who founded the French kingdom were Germanic tribes invading the country and who were stirring trouble until one of them, King Clovis, thought it was a smart move to adopt the French faith and then to tell all the other Franks, from now on you're Christians or else. That's how France became Christian. And it turned out to be a huge success for the Franks to take control of the country, which is today called France. So from that point of view, I say that the French and the Turks have a common scenario in their past. And for the Turks, the Arab world, first of all, remember one thing, they know very well the Arab world, extremely well. For them, it was for a long time colonies and members of the old Ottoman Empire. And they were administering these countries in a context which was generally peaceful, extremely tolerant, and stable, politically stable. Turkey is a big country, over 71 million people. It constitutes, therefore, a wild card between the West, the Arab world, and Central Asia. It is a relatively developed country with a life expectancy of 69 years. A GDP per capita of over $7,000, and more important, a literacy rate of 88%. It is not at all an underdeveloped country. And incidentally, most countries of the Arab world are just the same, not at all underdeveloped countries. You see, the Arab world, and even less Turkey, would be a country of people suffering of squalor, of malnutrition, and of absence of education. You have in Turkey several political parties. If I count right, there are 7. Correct me if I'm wrong. And elections are rated as perfectly fairly run. So it is a democracy. The Turks are ethnically parents of population of Central Asia, with a common or a related language and similar culture, notably the Turkmens, the Azeris, the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, and others. Turkey plays an essential role in these countries because, seen from these countries, Turkey is ahead, part of the free world, more advanced technologically, practicing free trade. And for their cousins in Central Asia, they are an opening in the same way that, for instance, Singapore can be for people in Malaysia, Indonesia, or the Philippines. And therefore, there is a natural demand combined with friendship and common interest, which means that the Turks, just as they find their way in the Arab world very easily, find their way in Central Asia very easily. The Turks have been doing business with Iran for a very, very long time. A bit less than half of the Iranians speak Turkish. And the two countries have ties which are business as usual, are not going to stop because of the fashion of today. Turkey, therefore, is now the Muslim country in the Middle East, which is an almost 100-year-old republic and democracy. Turkey was allied with Germany during World War I, neutral in World War II but leaning to the Allies, and a strong ally of the free world since. Let me quote a recent example. I said I wouldn't talk about recent events, just quoting one. About a month ago, it was announced that negotiations aimed at a comprehensive peace agreement have begun between Israel and Syria, mediated by Turkey. This happens all the time. Turkey is one of the main go-betweens within the Middle East to uphold silently a progress in peace negotiations. And for this, cooperating with, for instance, Egypt regarding the Gaza negotiations, with Qatar regarding negotiations between conflicting Lebanese parties, with Israel regarding matters of prisoners exchange. Sort of nitty-gritty work which is all the time trying to facilitate the present crisis. Same as the rest of the Muslims, including Arab world, Turkey's political life, however, is somewhat in a crisis. It is marked by an internal conflict between religious fundamentalists, typically represented by the AKP party, who want God's law, the Sharia, to be the sole law of the country, same as other Muslim fundamentalists, and generic Republicans who want to go on with separation of church and state. It is important today that the free world welcome Turkey's advice and assistance in the Middle East and does the right effort to further promote Republican institutions. There is a lot of work to do because today Turkish fundamentalists are hostile to what they call the West, and Turkish secularists are skeptical about the European opportunity, seeing democratization as a threat to secularism itself because it opens wider the door for the fundamentalist, as happened in Algeria, for instance. So it is important that the European Union realizes the opportunity and put back on its agenda Turkey's entry, showing a strong will to achieve. It is important also that Turkey remains what it is, a republic, therefore rule of law, democratic institutions, including separation of church and state. And yet, pressures to move away from these principles are at work. More Turks must realize that abandoning secular institutions would mean a regression in their development, as Iran already demonstrated, and an open door to international violence, uncontrolled ethnic prejudices, and general intolerance. If Turkey resolves this contradiction, it will be even more a credible example and influence for the secularization of the whole Arab world. And this is what I wanted to say today, and I will welcome your questions. I already have one.
Yeah, we know that since 9/11 and the rise of fundamentalism in Turkey, the momentum of Turkey to join the EU has kind of receded. Would Turkey stand to benefit in some respect if it maintained its position as this go-between and became like a Middle Eastern or Switzerland, and politically wasn't aligned with anyone and can function as this go-to nation? If it joins the EU, would it lose that prestige and that position?
Okay, good question. I think that if Turkey was a member of the EU, it would definitely gain prestige and credibility because it would be in a unique position once more. The sole Muslim country part of the European Union, and a big one, and already a significant economy with its natural role precisely as a clearinghouse vis-à-vis all the neighboring countries. I think that at this time, I cannot talk for the Turks. My impression is that right now the Turks are divided between let's move towards Islam or let's go on moving towards the West. I'm not sure that you have Turks people who would say let's stay just the way we are. There probably are. you see. But what we hear from the outside are those two conflicting messages. Yes, Ben.
May I comment something?
Of course.
I'm not Turkish, but if Turkish people in this room allow me, I want to talk a little bit. But I think I speak Turkish, so I am able to read the Turkish newspaper and to listen to the talks of the present party, you know, the AKP. Or I don't think I agree with the fact that they show a fundamentalist trend. Because if you remember, it's this party that actually started the negotiation going to the EU. So I think the classification that in Turkey there are two parts, the Islamic founded people who want to be closer to the East and the other West. I don't think this is correct because I know many Muslim people who want to be part of EU and they are okay with the secular system. And I know that most of the secularism part, they do not want to be part of the EU. Because what they understand of the secularism is denying some of the rights to the religious people. While the religious people, what they understand with the secularism is really state and church apart, but still having democratic rights. So as far as I know, there are two parts. The one that who want to be a part of the UE, but want still to, you know, be religious and have democratic rights for all, not just for the Muslims.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that. I wouldn't have dared to hope that. I'm glad to hear a Turk lady saying that. So in other words, you say that in Turkey you have good, faithful Muslims who would like to be part of Europe and do not see that a Oh, for instance, okay. And I could very well imagine why the secularist would like to stick to independence of the old Turkish Republic as it is and would rather shy away from European influence. I can imagine that. But it's good to hear in America from a Muslim that you have lots of Muslims in the Arab world and other Muslim countries who do not see at all as a contradiction becoming a democracy and being faithful to their religion. We have heard that several times in those conferences. I'm glad we hear it today.
Yes, and even Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan has never claimed that they are trying to bring the Sharia, the Islamic law, or they will just upside down everything in the country. Actually, they are trying to get into the EU. They are trying to make Turkey a democratic country, not just for the Muslim population, for everyone. You know, they have democratic rights, and this is a struggle, I guess.
Excellent.
Can I ask one question now?
Two if you want.
No, what you're saying is very, very interesting. But then I must ask you a question. So what is the fundamental difference between the two factions in Turkey? Because you said it is not religion, right? It's not based on religion, and it's not based on the wish or the desire to belong to the EU, because you have some in both. So what differentiates the two parties? Why is that a political struggle, and where does the struggle come from?
You know, there is a small part, actually, they call the elite. They are not big in number, but they are elite, so they have the power. They just don't want to lose some of their rights, some of their privileges. They are afraid that they will lose their status quo. That's why they are fighting against these ideas. I mean, they don't like the idea of people having democratic rights and rights to get into certain positions, so that they will lose some of their own privileges, I guess.
Which exist, as always, you know, when you have an old society and an old institution.
In recent discussions in Turkey, some of the elites claim that the vote of a professor should not be, or even a newspaperman, or a man who is educated. The vote of a man who is educated should not be the same as the
A
man,
farmer,
a villager,
shepherd.
or a shepherd. They claim that because in Turkey now the AKP party represents the 47% of the vote.
Yes.
And most of these people wants to live as Muslims. You know,
Yes.
they do want to practice their religion.
Yes.
But they also want to be part of the European Union, because being part of the European Union brings more democracy, more freedom, more human rights, and a life to, you know, and for them a dedicated life to their religion. So they have no problem with that. And
Good to hear.
There are some people, and they are not half of the Turkey. There are like maybe 20% or maybe even less. They do not want to be part of the European Union because so far they had many privileges, and they don't want to lose them because democracy would make them lose their privileges.
I think that's very clear.
Is actually they have some kind of control power on some of the regions in Turkey. They don't want to lose their control power. So in a democracy, everybody's equal. So the human rights are very equal. So they will not be able to do the bad stuff what they used to be doing. I would say there's maybe deep government also in Turkey as there are on other some countries. So these kind of minority groups do not want to lose their control over the country. So that's why they don't want to be part of the European Union, but they are minority.
Would it be too much to compare it a little bit to South Africa before apartheid, in which you had a white population who were strongly Republican, provided democracy was not extended to the mass of the population because of the privileges they were getting out of it, and eventually they couldn't go on forever, and you did have a very strong reformation in South Africa. So it can be maybe a little bit that kind of situation.
People say everybody is equal, but some people are...
Now, got to remember, the inventors of democracy, who were the Greeks 2,500 years ago, were saying exactly the same thing. Democracy is for 50,000 Greeks. It is not for the barbarians who are around, of course, you see. It's an old problem.
So the current problem in Turkey is exactly what you are saying.
Well, thank you.
That's,
So I'm not saying too many stupidities about Turkey after all.
it depends on, you know, these point of views depends on which media you are reading or you are referring to. Because
Sounds familiar. Sounds familiar.
So if you read some media, you will see that, you know, there are some fundamentalists who are trying to take, you know, control of the country. But it's not like that at all.
Read The Economist. That gives you a very balanced picture. The Economist's coverage of Turkey is very balanced.
Yes?
Rita? Yeah.
Oh.
You can.
Okay, well,
Start.
first of all, I'd like to say thank you for coming. A very good presentation. And I agree with you that Turkey should be part of the EU. And I kind of, you know, understanding the problems within the Turkish society and Turkish discourse about whether or not they want to be part of the EU, I think there is an equal amount of discourse that's happening in Europe. And you know, there's governments in Europe who are both for and against that, and I think
Yes.
it's just as important to take those into consideration as well, because it seems like every camp has something negative to say about Turkey joining the EU.
Yes.
So, you know, that's also another aspect of that.
Well, in that case, I'd like to make one comment about Europe, which today consists in 27 countries. Each time Europe has enlarged, it has created opportunities, certainly, but also created new problems and made Europe more and more difficult to manage when it comes to make common decisions. Easy to manage, you know, when it is business as usual, extending regulations, extending standards, doing free trade. But when it comes to a major crisis, when Europe has to talk with a single voice, it's getting more and more difficult. And the old-timers in Europe, like the French and the German, the Italian, the Belgian, would say, it was so nice when we were only 6 countries. Now we are 27. And now on top of that, we're going to have Turkey. Oh my God, a Muslim country, 71 million people, all far away. Oh no, you see. And it's not that much against the Turks as themselves, you know, that as living those growing difficulties in the growth of Europe. And I would say there is also a lack of vision here, you see. Europe has been drowning in petty disputes today and is losing the big picture. If you go back to the spirit of 1958, you would say, and it was said at the time, yes, we will go as far as Turkey.
I'd just like to point out here that in that list of countries you didn't include the UK, and the UK has always had been a very firm supporter of entry to the EU.
Thank you.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. My impression is that American media would be, as a rule, generally favorable to Turkey, but knowing, in fact, little about Turkey itself. That would be my impression.
Within Europe, and also this is a global issue, that in the past we had this huge wave of nationalism which caused all kinds of problems, especially in Europe. And then globalization kind of made that go away, and we were thinking about a global picture. And it seems like now nationalism is coming back. Do you think this is a trend that will continue, that nationalism will get stronger in Europe and outside Europe? And if so, what will that do to you?
Again, I'm going to give you my opinion, and other Europeans here might disagree. My opinion is this. When things are going relatively well, or not too bad, everybody is going to sleep, business as usual, routine decisions, no big vision, just the day's problems are enough for the agenda, and, we had a good meeting, let's go to bed, When there is a crisis, then you see, almost by chance and necessity, a European will that can express itself. The first time you saw it at a big scale was in 2003, when you had that enormous surprise, also for the French and the Germans, that the first time in their common history they were taking the same side against the Anglo-Saxon world, deferring on a major issue, which was Iraq, with the Anglo-Saxon world. And the French and the Germans look at themselves saying, you know what, that never happened to us. Maybe it's something good. Next crisis, you might see that kind of phenomenon again, and growing more and more to a structure to make common decisions in case of emergency only. In other words, regarding foreign policy and defense to begin with. That, I think, we will move to it by regular waves without politicians being fully aware of it. Because the two people who were the most surprised were Jacques Chirac and Gerhard Schröder. Initially you would have told them 10 years before, this is the situation in which you will both be. Chirac would have told you, who is Gerhard Schröder? You see what I mean? So it came as a surprise, and yet it happened.
I think we kind of closed the question part, but even though after we close it, you can personally, maybe if you have time, they can come and ask you more questions.
Very happy to.
But I have a question before you go.
It's not fair.
Go ahead.
I know it's not fair, but it's the word.
So you are more equal now?
Yeah, I'm one of those elites. Yeah. I think two comments I would like to make. One is, I think that's kind of misunderstanding in Turkey is going on, but I think we need to work on more is, as a person, you can be religious, but as the governing body, you cannot. I mean, that is the difference, I think, having a hard time to differ. And the governing party right now, yes, personally they are religious, but running a country in a religious way is not in their agenda. I know this because I know a lot of people at ministerial level I work with under Europe, Turkey. The second thing, it's a question to you, and there are certain countries like UK really supporting Turkey for EU from the really beginning. But this is not happening with France. We are always, specifically after the Sarkozy, we are having, kind of hard time in those relations. What do you see of the future in terms of France-Turkey relations and in terms of supporting Turkey for EU?
Okay. Well, to begin with, I will tell you, France is similar to the United States by the fact that presidents come and go, and after that, it's business as usual. Okay. So forget what Mr. Sarkozy wants to do today. He is known for having strong impulses, and then quickly changing his mind. Wait and see. Okay. But if you look at the long-term trend, it is absolutely true that there is a very, very old fundamental divergence of opinion between the British and the French. Here I talk with authority because I'm half British by birth. And this has to do with this. For the French and the Germans and a few others, the Belgians, for instance, there is no question that the intent of the European Union was abandoning sovereignty and creating a federal republic of Europe. And there was absolutely no doubt that for the British, a European Union was supposed to be a free trade area as large as possible, with the Turks, with the Moroccans, with whoever wants to join in, because free trade is good for all, with common rules facilitating trades, with treaties guaranteeing peace, but never let go on the matter of sovereignty. Never will Britain abandon its sovereignty, and to all people, to the continental Europeans. It's unthinkable. On this point, the British and the French, for a long time, have agreed to disagree and to simply avoid the subject. But on this issue, you're going to see the French, therefore, are lukewarm about Turkey joining the European Union, insofar as it is moving away from the dream of the big federal republic, which is still, and I heard it many times in the streets in France, which still very much their initial commitment to Europe. You've got to understand that the French and the Germans have a unique experience that the British don't have at all. Between 1806 and 1945, the two countries were at war, with a level of hatred together, of prejudices towards each other, which are similar only today what you have in the Arab world and the United States. And I would say on both sides. The French and the Germans went through that unique experience of completely reverting course, completely joining forces and saying, we must never again, whatever we think of each other, never again resort to war. And we must drag the rest of Europe in that same dream. And the rest of Europe followed. You've got two countries who in 1945 were down to nothing, destroyed not only materially, but in terms of national identity, in terms of dignity, everything. They were the defeated parties, together with the Italians, among the big countries, in Europe. This was an education that the British never had, because they were on the winning side. You see, and it is a totally different education. End of remark.
Okay. I think one good thing, supporting what you are saying over here, I think yesterday or maybe the day before yesterday, Monday, there was a resolution, they just, I think, brought to the Congress, the French Congress, by Jacques Chirac at that time, 2005, did not pass. I think that's something recently happened.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah, telling, which kind of Congress was telling to Sarkozy, no, you should not be going that way, that 5%.
President Sarkozy did have a tendency of considering that anything that President Chirac had done was wrong and he was going to go the other way. It will pass. It will pass.
Okay, I think I have to, wrap up the program. Before you I would like to give you a small gift.
Thank you.
That,
you call that a small gift?
You would remember us. And this is, this is a kind of traditional piece from Kütahya, the famous city.
Wow.
And with this, porcelain.
Ooh. I'm very touched.
And it's a gift for you for today, and you could remember us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for this excellent
I'll carry it very carefully.
Yeah.